As I pinned these jeans that we found while we were on vacation, which I was actually doing the alteration while we were on vacation as well, using my aunt's old sewing machine, which was super cool. But you'll notice that I chose to take in the amount from the side seams. So this particular pair of pants did not have rivets in the side seam pockets, which is one of the reasons why taking in from the side seams isn't always easy or isn't something that you think that you would want to do. Definitely, if there were the rivets in the pocket, I probably would not have chosen that route for these ones. But in this case, it was actually very convenient. And given the amount that we were taking in, it did have a really good effect in the end. I just wanted to add this picture of the finished product so that you can see how it is going to look once the alteration takes place, because always having that finished product in mind does help us as we move forward into the alteration. As when with any alteration, I start by measuring my pins. So how much am I taking in, especially starting at the waist? And here you can tell it is a pretty significant amount. For the most part, whenever I am doing an alteration, I'm always trying to make it symmetrical. So I'm going to take the same amount out from each side. And even though this belt loop is not falling right at the side seam, I am going to take it out because I need that space to be open when I'm opening up the waistband. And it is also noteworthy to say that there's no seam in this waistband. So by taking in from the side seams, I'm actually going to be creating a seam in the waistband. And so you can use a seam ripper, just a typical seam ripper for all of the stitches that you're going to have to take out at home. I do have one that's more like a razor, which probably would have been helpful for this alteration, especially with the belt loops, but any seam ripper will do. If your seam ripper is dull, I might recommend getting another one, because if you get very far into thrifting and altering, seam rippers are going to become a bit of your best friend. Whether you love them or hate them, you're going to need to use them, because we're always taking out something before we can do the alteration. So now I'm headed into that waistband, and you're just going to start pulling away at those stitches. Remember that this is not your typical all-purpose thread. Typically, the thread that is used to make jeans is a thicker jean thread or a top stitching thread, but it may be a little bit harder to take out than something that is made with all-purpose thread. And so just keep plucking away. And you'll also notice that there's a top stitch on the top of the waistband. And so that also needs to come out so that we can make it nice and flat when I go ahead and make that seam in the waistband. You'll also notice that sometimes when you're pulling a thread, it does, you can catch it in just the right way so that you can actually pull and create a run, so that you don't have to sit there and pluck every single stitch out, which that's always super convenient if that's possible. So I try, not the construction of every pair of pants isn't always the case where you can find that stitch. And now you'll see that I have the waistband completely removed and separated. And then I'm going to have to go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other side. Once my waistband is completely detached, then I'm going to go ahead and try and open it up and just really get it as flat as possible, because this is where I'm going to want to make a seam where there isn't a seam. And I found that I hadn't taken it out quite far enough in order to lay as flat as I wanted it to be, because if you don't only take out the parts where you're altering and don't get far enough away from the seam you're altering, it'll cause the fabric to bunch up a lot in your sewing machine or right there, and it is much more accurate and just easier to work with if you just take out a little bit more. You know, nobody loves to seam rip out threads and restitch them, but trust me, in the long run, I would say from my own experience, it's just so much easier if you take out a little bit more. So I am using the pins here to mark how far I need. So these pins actually were marking my alteration. And then as I open the pants, turn them inside out, I'm going to use tailor's chalk and a ruler to mark the alteration for the side seam. So the tailor's chalk is actually going to be marking my stitch line. And one of the most important things here is you really want to taper it. So say at the waist, it was starting at 1 inch, but as we go down through the hips are also that significant amount, but headed towards the leg and thigh area, I'm going to taper back out to the original seam rather than just jutting out. It really is always important to taper. Just get closer and closer to the original seam as you're going down. And this will help it have a much more tailored look and a more professional look. So as you can see, my ruler now is much closer to the seam than it was at the top of the pant line. And then I'm going to take them right over to the sewing machine and get ready to put that waistband on first. So just making sure that it's super flat. Again, you can see there's so much fabric in there because if you think about constructing clothing from patterns or from scratch, typically you don't run into these issues because you're working with whole pieces at a time and there is a method of construction. So this is a challenge that you'll run into when you are altering. It's just you sometimes have like a squeeze getting into a little corner, unless you really like here I could have taken the whole waistband out, but that would have been a bit of a nuisance. And just going ahead and cutting that thread, and then I'm clipping off, leaving a seam allowance, but I'm clipping off a good portion of that because we don't want the extra bulk in the seam. And I would say that I leave, you know, a standard like 3/8 seam allowance in here. And when I'm turning that waistband back over with your fingers, you have to open up that seam allowance to lay flat. Then I'm going to go ahead and stitch down the side of the pants. Now you'll notice that as we get to the thicker parts where there are extra seams, you know, those decorative seams in jeans, if you have a machine that is a you know, home machine, it's possible that you'll have a little bit of trouble. Just be patient, go slow, give it a little bit of extra tender loving care as you're stitching over a thick seam. And here, like I said, I'm just following my tailor's chalk line all the way down until I'm ready to taper back in. And another thing, as I sew, you'll see that I continually like reposition my fabric because you want to make sure that you don't have anything caught up underneath, which will be a little bit of an aggravation because it'll involve more seam ripping if something turns under and catches. Of course, the table's shaking a little, and so that makes the stitching and the recording a little bit blurry. But I think you can get the idea from this as to the best way to taper into that seam. I do just love this vintage Singer that I got a chance to use while we were away. It was such a pleasure. And I'm coming right up now on the final taper. You can see I'm getting closer and closer to the outside edge, the original seam. And I'm just going to try and blend right into that. I'm just slowly, slowly curving right into that, see, until I meet it, and then go for a little ways and do a little forward and backward stitch to make that solidify and just really knot off that end. Here on the other side, the way that I stitched it was from the top end. So I just wanted to see how much you will go through the pocket. So we are taking a little bit out of the pocket. It does make them but a little bit smaller, but it really, my daughter didn't notice the difference in the pocket size. So that was totally fine. So once the side seams are done, I go ahead and trim the seam allowance off. Again, leave yourself that 3/8, 5/8 of an inch. If I was home with a serger or a machine that had a zigzag stitch, I might serge or finish off this edge with a zigzag. You could try pinking shears. In this case, I actually did leave it raw. And here you'll also see this was the other side that I didn't trim the waistbands yet, but now I'm gonna go ahead and trim that. Just cut it right off. And then opening up the seam allowance within the waistband, just trying to lay it flat and get all those stitches from before off. Just clear them right out of the way. And I just wanted to make note, don't you love the vintage ironing board cover here in the background as well? Pretty cool. So this is a lot of seam allowance, trying to tuck all in to the seam. Just get those threads out of the way, turn it under, lay it as flat as you can, and just keep working it until you feel like it is suitable. And you will notice I actually did not take the belt loop off from the bottom that attached to the actual pants. I just took it off from the top. So now that I have that situated, I'm ready to take it over to the sewing machine. Again, all I have with me right now was the white thread, but typically I do try to use matching thread just to make the seam as inconspicuous as possible, the alteration. I'm gonna have to stitch down that waistband seam. Just like this, again, it is a lot of fabric. Be patient with your machine. If it doesn't like lots of fabric, make sure you have the right needle. All of these things are super important when you are working on an alteration, and understand that frustration can get in our way and things don't always work out the way that we planned, but just be patient. And as you see, now I'm attaching the belt loop, which is just a bit more of an added bulk. Just slowly going over that. If you can back stitch, that'd be great. Or if you just want to go over it a couple times, sometimes in the back stitch mode, it doesn't like to go over, heavy seams, depending on what kind of machine. So this vintage machine actually doesn't even have a back stitch, but it worked super well for this project and it was so much fun. So I hope you enjoyed this alteration, and maybe it'll inspire you to do a little thrifting and altering on your own. And I know that I'm also going to link in here another video that I did with a jean alteration that we took in from the back seam. So just remembering that there are a couple of different ways to do alterations. It all depends on the pants and the style. And it's always good to learn more and learn new ones. So if you have comments about what you would like to see in the future, feel free to drop them in the comment section below, like and subscribe. But also, I did want to remind you that I do have a resource, a thrifter's guide for sewing, just some things to look for when you're out in a thrift store. I'm going to drop that also in the comment section below. And I wanted to just to make sure, if you've been looking at this video and you see the picture of the finished product, that this is what it looks like when it's done. Just a reminder where we're going, how we got there, and keep that in mind with your own sewing.
Thank you for watching. You can shop tutorials and classes on my website, naomifeda.net. Be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, may God sow his love into your heart today.